Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. The King in Yellow does not announce his arrival. He seeps in through margins, through whispers, through the delicate cracks in the psyche that we mistake for dreams. To know of him is to be altered, not by some melodramatic thunderbolt from beyond the stars, but by something far more terrible. The quiet realization that reality is paper thin, and something, has already read the last line. There's something almost elegant in how the king waits behind the veil. A monarch without kingdom, a deity without doctrine, and yet his power is absolute, not through brute force, but through the betrayal of truth itself. He is not death, not madness, not illusion. He is the moment you realize you are wearing someone else's skin, and always have been. There are gods of light, gods of blood, gods of law. But the King in Yellow is the god of that which should not be named because it already lives inside your name. This is not just a horror story. This is an autopsy of belief, a peeling away of the mind's protective layers, and the revelation of a throne we never knew we built. Step closer. The play is about to begin. There is no surviving complete version of the King in Yellow play. Not in our world, not in any verifiable collection. And yet, countless minds have glimpsed fragments of its script, often in dreams or in moments of inexplicable dread. Some claim it was written by a madman, others insist it was never written at all, only received, like divine scripture from a god who lies. The play is not literature. It is contagion, a meme in the ancient, dreadful sense, a thought that carries with it the seeds of its own replication and your own ruin. The first act is deceptively sane. It lulls the reader, the viewer, the participant into a false sense of melancholic tragedy. There is talk of lost kingdoms, of fate and masks, and a city that glimmers on the edge of memory. There is beauty in its words, a kind of aching, haunted poetry that feels older than humanity. But then comes the second act, and no one who sees the second act remains unchanged. Some say the text becomes fluid, unreadable. Others report pages that rearrange themselves when looked at too long. But all accounts converge on this. The second act is not a story, it is a key, and it unlocks the mind in a way it was never meant to be opened. What follows is not madness in the usual sense. It is not hysteria, not paranoia, it is revelation. The play shows you something true, horribly, cosmically true, that your mind cannot reconcile with the comforting lie of daily existence. Some scream, some weep, some smile with horrible serenity, a few even laugh. But all of them, without exception, cease to be who they were before they read it. Because the play does not end on stage. It continues in you. There are accounts, whispered, fragmented, of people disappearing after encountering the script, not vanishing in body but in soul. Their personalities erode, replaced by characters who speak in riddles, who wear masks without strings. Some become prophets of the Yellow King, others become actors in an invisible, ongoing performance. They recite lines no one taught them. They speak of stars aligning, of twin suns and black lakes. And always, they end with the phrase, "No mask, then it is time." This is the ultimate horror of the play. It does not kill. It transforms. It peels away your layers until you are nothing but a vessel for the story. You don't watch the King in Yellow. It watches you. And if you understand even a single stanza, you have already begun to speak its language. You are, in some way, already part of the cast. Literary scholars who dare to treat it as metaphor or allegory miss the point entirely. The play is not about madness, it is madness. It is the living expression of a cosmic force that uses narrative the way a parasite uses a host. It spreads, not through violence, but through curiosity, through the desire to know. It is temptation made text. And worst of all, perhaps it is not fictional. What if it is a memory? A fragment of something ancient, banished from time itself, now clawing its way back into the waking world one reader at a time. What if the play is a trap laid across dimensions? What if it is bait? To read The King in Yellow is to pierce the veil, willingly or not. And once you have seen beyond that veil, you can never return. The curtain has risen. You are no longer in the audience. You are on stage. The pallid mask is not merely a disguise. It is a crucible. A paradox made flesh, a boundary between illusion and truth, self and other. Worn by the King in Yellow, the mask is not there to conceal a face, but to suggest there was never one to begin with. It does not hide, it replaces. It turns the wearer into something else, something that was always watching, waiting to be let in. Its color is not bone white, not ivory. It is the color of death, stripped of its drama. A pale, dry hue like forgotten parchment or decayed wax, something unfinished and quietly dreadful. And it is always described with one word, pallid, as if the very term carries its own weight of sickness, of faded vitality. There is nothing vibrant behind the mask, only the slow erosion of identity. Whoever wears it is not just playing a role, they become a vessel. The mask binds and erases. It is the stage's final act of violence, not the death of the character, but the obliteration of the actor. One day, you find the mask in your hands. You don't remember picking it up, but there it is. And as you lift it to your face, you realize something awful. It already fits perfectly. Some say the king in yellow is the mask, that he has no face at all. Others believe the mask is a prison, locking away something far worse beneath it. A thing with no form, no name, no tether to human understanding. But the most disturbing idea is that the king was once something else. A god who looked upon its own divine reflection and could not bear the truth. And so it masked itself. Not to hide from us, but from itself. A cosmic denial so absolute that it became contagious. There's an uncanny terror in masks, especially those that smile. They turn every expression into a lie. The pallid mask doesn't smirk or grin, it stares. Blank, neutral, perfect. You project your fears onto it because it gives you nothing in return. No judgment, no recognition, just a void shaped like a face. The mask infects those who see it, even if they never wear it. In stories and dreams, people find themselves haunted by the idea of the mask long after the vision fades. They begin to imagine what it would feel like against their skin. They start to wonder if they've been wearing masks their whole lives, personalities crafted to survive, to fit, to function. And the pallid mask whispers, none of those were real. It's no accident that actors wear masks in ancient ritual. They invoke spirits, gods, archetypes. The pallid mask is the anti-mask, not an invocation, but an erasure. It calls forth not a persona, but a truth so unbearable that it must be hidden again and again, century after century. But it always returns, because the truth it conceals is the same for all of us, that we are stories told to ourselves. And the moment we see that, we unravel. Some say there are cults who wear the mask in secret ceremonies, passing it from hand to trembling hand, each hoping it will not fit them. Others say the king never takes it off because there is nothing left beneath. And then there are those who claim that the mask has no inside or outside. It is not an object, but a concept. A meme that takes root in the soul. The pallid mask teaches us that identity is a fragile performance, and the king in yellow is the final critic. He watches us act out our lives, applauding silently as we stumble toward the realization that the roles we play were never ours to choose. We are not the authors. We are not the audience. We are merely characters in a script written in yellow ink, beneath a sky with twin suns, in a city that should not be. And the mask, that beautiful, terrible mask, is the only costume we ever truly owned. Carcosa is not a place, not in the sense that London is a place, or Cairo, or even Orlaya. It exists in a different register. Not quite memory, not quite dream. To speak of Carcosa is to whisper to something older than geography, something that crawled into the human unconscious before history began. It is the kingdom of lost time, where every building is a ruin even as it is built, and the sky weeps golden rain over streets paved with forgotten sorrow. No one walks into Carcosa. You arrive, often without knowing. You see it in your dreams first. Twin suns casting impossible shadows, black stars hanging like malignant eyes in a dull yellow sky. A lake so still it seems to hold its breath. A palace of colossal bones stretching toward a heaven that fled long ago. And above it all, the silence. Not the peace of sleep, but the hush of a world that has already heard the last scream. Descriptions vary, but all versions of Carcosa share a singular quality: dissonance. Time flows wrong here. One moment you walk through a bustling court, the next you realize the people around you have been dead for centuries. Or worse, are yet to be born. Buildings crumble as you look at them, but remain standing when you glance away. The stars do not move, and yet the sky ages. It's a city made of broken clocks and haunted architecture, stitched together from the memories of dead civilizations. Some believe Carcosa is a reflection of the soul, distorted by exposure to the king in yellow. That once the play enters your mind, the The city is born within you. Others think it predates humanity altogether, a forgotten monument to the madness of gods who once wore human shapes and walked among the stars. There are whispers that Carcosa is not even a city, but a sentient organism, and we are its thoughts, drifting in and out of coherence. The Lake of Holly is often mentioned in the same breath. A vast, unmoving expanse of water that stretches to infinity, its surface so smooth it acts as a mirror for madness. Stare into it too long and you may see yourself wearing the pallid mask, or worse, see nothing at all. Some say the king resides beneath that lake, not as a creature of flesh, but as an idea sleeping in liquid time. The yellow moon that floats above the lake has no name, only a feeling: dread, longing, inevitability. Carcosa is a city you remember visiting even if you never have. It infects the past, rewriting your dreams, convincing you that you once stood upon its cracked balconies and wept for a love you never had. It creates nostalgia for something you were never part of. This is how it spreads. Through memory, through yearning, through the hunger for meaning in a meaningless universe. That hunger leads you to Carcosa, and once you arrive, you can never quite leave. There are no citizens in Carcosa, only actors. Everyone is in costume. Everyone speaks in riddles or stares with silent recognition. You look into their eyes and realize they know your lines before you speak them. They've seen your performance already, perhaps 1,000 times. Perhaps this is not your first visit. Perhaps you always return to Carcosa in the end. And what of the palace? That monolithic, ever-shifting spire at the city's heart. It is said to contain every version of the play ever written and every life the king in yellow has touched. Some believe it is alive, that its doors lead not into rooms but into roles. Enter one chamber, and you become a poet who has just finished the second act. Enter another, and you're a masked soldier, doomed to fight a war that never ends. The palace is the soul of Carcosa, and the soul of Carcosa is scripted. This city is not a prison, not in the traditional sense. It is worse. It is a stage, and the longer you stay, the more your lines come naturally. You stop resisting. You stop remembering. The self fades, but the role continues. That's the secret of Carcosa. You never wanted to leave. The horror isn't being trapped. The horror is how right it feels to stay. Hastur is the shadow that follows every mention of the king in yellow. He is the echo that never stops repeating, the name that should not be spoken, not because it brings death, but because it brings context. And in the mythos of cosmic horror, context is the most dangerous revelation of all. Hastur is mystery metastasized. He is at once the king's twin, his father, his reflection, his enemy, or perhaps none of those. Perhaps the most terrible truth is that he does not exist, except as the outline of absence that gives the king in yellow shape. In Robert W. Chambers' original stories, Hastur is mentioned almost casually, a place, a concept, never clearly defined. But as the mythology grew, especially under the pens of Lovecraft and Derleth, Hastur was mutated into something more explicitly divine and terrifying. A great old one, a forgotten god, a whisper from the stars, but always his definition is unstable. Every attempt to pin him down slides off like oil on glass, and this perhaps is the key. Hastur is not to be known, he is to be felt, like gravity, like dread. There is a powerful fan theory that Hastur and the king in yellow are the same entity, split by the human need to classify what should remain unclassifiable. In this interpretation, the king is the mask, the role, the character we see and fear. Hastur is the soul beneath, the alien intelligence that wears that role like a second skin. Or reverse it, the king is the emergent phenomenon, the echo, the performance. Hastur is the source, the dead star around which the madness orbits. But then again, perhaps that's just what they want us to believe. The very act of making this distinction might be the first act of the play. Others claim Hastur is the true god, and the king in yellow is merely his prophet or avatar. The way a mask speaks not for itself but for the actor beneath. This lends a chilling perspective to the play, that it is not art but scripture, not madness but doctrine. If Hastur is the god, then the play is his gospel. And every performance is a sermon, every reader is a disciple, every descent into madness is a baptism. Yet another idea, far darker, suggests that Hastur is not an external god at all, but the internal god, the one awakened when the king infects a mind. That the pallid mask is the ignition point, and what it awakens inside the psyche is not madness, but Hastur himself. In this view, Hastur is the result of the play, not its origin. A spiritual parasite born from narrative, fed by belief, evolving inside every soul that glimpses the yellow sign. He is a god created by the fiction, a fiction so powerful it became real. And then there's the idea that Hastur is a trick, a false name, a red herring, that the word itself was introduced to confuse, to misdirect, a mask for the mask. In this reading, the king in yellow has no twin, no brother, no god. He is alone, unopposed, uncontained, and the myth of Hastur is simply another act in his endless, sprawling performance. A way to make us feel there is a structure, an enemy, a balance, but there isn't. There's only the king, and the mask, and the play. No matter which interpretation you choose, or are chosen by, the truth remains elusive. And that is precisely the point. The uncertainty around Hastur is the mechanism of his horror. A god you understand can be fought, worshipped, or ignored. A god you almost understand is a splinter in the soul. The moment you try to define him, he slips through your mind, leaving behind only silence, a tinge of yellow, and the dreadful urge to perform. So we ask, who is Hastur? The king's shadow, his twin, his lie, his soul. The answer is yes, and also no, and also you. Because once you ask the question, you are already part of the answer. If the king in yellow is a god, then there must be worshippers. Not the kind who gather in temples chanting by candlelight, though perhaps they do that too. The real cult of the king is more insidious, more personal. It doesn't recruit, it infects. One does not join it through invitation, but through revelation. You read the play, you see the sign, and you are never alone again. These devotees are not united by doctrine. There is no sacred text beyond the play, no commandments etched in stone. Their unity comes from disintegration, from the shared experience of losing one's self and finding something else in its place. They do not kneel before a throne. They become extensions of it. Their rituals vary, shaped by region, history, and madness. Some burn yellow candles made of wax stolen from corpses. Some walk the streets in ragged theater costumes, whispering lines only they understand. Others simply stare at the sky, waiting for it to turn gold. Imagine a priesthood built not on belief, but on contagion. Each cultist a carrier of divine narrative, their minds rewritten to serve a script that bends reality. They don't preach, they perform. Each moment of their life is part of a larger act, one that doesn't end until the curtain falls on reality itself. They smile too often. They cry when it rains. They always know when you've seen the sign. And they speak as if reciting from memory, even when responding to questions no one has asked. There are rumors of gatherings, of masked rituals held in forgotten theaters, abandoned asylum courtyards, or beneath ruined cities where the echo of Carcosa lingers. These ceremonies are less worship than surrender. Participants don yellow robes, often stained and frayed, and chant lines from the second act of the play. Some weep as they do, some laugh. All understand that they are not audience members. They are cast. They are being watched. Perhaps most chilling is the belief that the cult does not serve the king willingly. Rather, they are trapped in a recursive performance, each action compelled by the play's invisible direction. Their lives are no longer linear. They loop, stutter, rewrite themselves. You might meet the same cultist in 3 different cities, claiming they've never seen you before, or worse, claiming they have, but in a different role. To them, identity is fluid. The mask is truth. Names are irrelevant. Only the performance matters. Some say the cult is organized, guided by high priests who wear gilded versions of the pallid mask and speak in perfect iambic verse. Others argue the cult is not a singular entity, but a psychic network, a web of fractured minds all linked by the yellow sign. Information passes between them in dreams, in sudden flashes of shared memory. They are a hive, or perhaps a choir. And the song they sing is written in a language that kills the part of you that refuses to believe. Among the more disturbing tales are those of false memories, people suddenly recalling years spent in the cult, entire lives rehearsed and erased. They wake screaming, clutching at invisible robes, muttering verses that shouldn't exist. These are not converts, they are drafted. Reality restructured them, slid them into roles they never auditioned for. And the script? The sacred script always begins with, "Have you seen the yellow sign?" The cult is not trying to summon the king. That would be far too human a goal. They do not wish to bring him into our world. They wish to return to his. They believe this world is a fiction, a rehearsal, a mistake. Carcosa is the original, Earth is the parody, and the play is the way back. Every performance brings them closer. Every new reader is another brick in the road. You might think they are mad, but to them, you are the one who is blind. They see the world for what it is, a stage, a lie, a crumbling set piece. And when they look at you, they are not seeing you. They are seeing your role, your lines, your inevitable fall. The cult is not made of believers. It is made of realists. They do not worship the King in Yellow because he is powerful. They worship him because he is true. The King in Yellow began not as a god, but as a whisper. In 1895, Robert W. Chambers published The King in Yellow, a collection of loosely connected stories haunted by a forbidden play and the enigmatic figure who gives the book its name. Chambers never fully defined the king, and that was his genius. The figure lingered at the edges, a myth half-formed, casting a long shadow over characters already cracking beneath the weight of unseen truths. The ambiguity made him powerful. Readers filled in the blanks with their own fears, and that, more than anything, ensured the king's survival. Chambers was not a horror writer in the mold of Lovecraft. He was a romanticist, a fantasist, a spinner of dreamy tales. Yet with The King in Yellow, he birthed a cosmic figure that would eventually be grafted onto the darker mythologies of the 20th century. August Derleth and later writers would sweep the king into the orbit of the Cthulhu mythos, reshaping him into a more structured entity, giving him a lineage, a domain, even siblings among the great old ones. But something essential was lost in translation. In Derleth's hands, the king became more comprehensible. Hastur's avatar, ruler of Carcosa, a deity with alignment and purpose. Useful, perhaps, for game mechanics and taxonomy, but diminished. The horror of the king was never in what he was, but in what he might be. Chambers' vision was dreamlike, contradictory, poetic, a yellow thread running through the fabric of sanity. Derleth tried to sew it into a robe of canon, and in doing so turned a whisper into a diagram. Yet the king survived even that. He transcended the cages of classification. In Lovecraft's own works, the king is barely mentioned, a background figure, a flicker in the night. But that was enough. The king slipped through the cracks, showing up in dreams, in apocrypha, in the minds of those already primed to believe. Writers like Carl Edward Wagner and Lynn Carter reawakened him in the pulp tradition. More recently, contemporary horror has embraced him not as a fixed character, but as an aesthetic, a symbol of narrative rot and existential collapse. In True Detective's first season, the king returned again, not as a literal god, but as a metaphor for systemic decay and occult trauma. Carcosa became a byword for corruption too deep to name, and the Yellow King was no longer a cosmic deity, but a human monster wearing the myth as a mask. That's the beauty of this figure. He adapts. He shifts. He wears whatever role the play demands. In some stories, he is a trickster. In others, a tragedy. In all, he is an infection. Games like Call of Cthulhu, Delta Green, and Arkham Horror reintroduce the king as a playable horror, statted, categorized, but never truly contained. The best of these portrayals embrace the theatricality of the figure. Yellow robes, masks, plays that rewrite the universe. They understand that the king is not a villain to be defeated, but a concept to be survived. In indie horror, creepypasta, ARGs, and speculative fiction, the king thrives as a viral idea, not bound to one continuity, but bleeding across them. He shows up in whispers, in stage directions no one remembers writing, in dreams that feel like rehearsals. He is a meme of dread, a god built not from worship but from interpretation. And this may be his final form, or lack thereof. The King in Yellow is no longer just a character or even a myth. He is a framework for storytelling itself. A way to talk about the loss of identity, the fragility of narrative, the horror of being a character in someone else's script. Modern authors have picked up the yellow thread and woven it into psychological horror, postmodern metafiction, and even surrealist theater. He is no longer bound to one mythology. He has become his own. The King in Yellow doesn't need Carcosa or Hastur or the Lake of Holly. He only needs a stage. And now, every medium is a stage, every story a potential play. The audience waits, the mask is ready. And perhaps that is the most terrifying truth of all, that he is still evolving, still watching, that the next iteration of the King in Yellow may not come from a book or a show or a game. It may come from you, from your dreams, from the moment you start writing something and you don't remember where the idea came from, only that it was already there, waiting. Madness, in the presence of the King in Yellow, is not a descent. It is an ascension. That's the first and most terrifying inversion. We are taught to fear madness as a loss, as the collapse of order into chaos, but those touched by the King do not scream because they're falling. They scream because they're rising above the lie of consensus reality. Madness, in his presence, is not decay. It is clarity, the unbearable clarity of a higher truth. The mind, built delicately to filter the infinite down into manageable delusions, simply cannot withstand the removal of those filters. We were not meant to see beyond the veil, to understand that time is not linear, that self is not sovereign, that identity is not fixed. The King rips those illusions away, not cruelly, but inevitably, like gravity, like entropy. He doesn't destroy minds, he opens them. And what pours in is not chaos, it is order, but not the kind we can survive. It is an alien structure of thought, a script written in an architecture too vast, too intricate for a single brain to house. Those who read the play, those who see the sign, begin to glimpse this structure. And like any organism exposed to a virus, they change. Their old thoughts become obsolete, their dreams shift, the language of their inner monologue starts to rhyme. They begin to act according to cues they cannot perceive. The madness is not madness, it is programming. That's why the afflicted are so dangerous. They are not random, they are not broken. They are operating on new logic, one invisible to everyone else. And yet, if you look closely, there are patterns. They gather in circles. They echo lines from the same passages. They pause at the same moments. They smile when you speak the wrong name. You think they are mad. But to each other, they are sane. You are the outsider. You are the mask. Philosophers have long argued that what we call reality is merely a shared hallucination, a consensus dream shaped by biology, language, and culture. The King in Yellow shatters that consensus. He offers a new one, a darker dream, one not shared by accident, but by intention. The infection is not a breakdown, it is a correction, a return to an older reality that existed before humanity constructed its palatable fictions. Some describe the experience of madness under the King's gaze as ecstatic. They speak of weightlessness, of the erasure of guilt and shame, of the feeling of being watched and understood completely. There is love in it, they say. But not human love, a love so vast, so alien that it obliterates the self. A love that consumes its object until there is no distinction between worshipper and worshipped. They become part of the King. They become him. Others resist. They claw at their own skin, they gouge out eyes, they chant prayers from a dozen dead religions trying to anchor themselves in the old truth. But the mask does not care. The play continues. The revelation cannot be unlearned, and those who fight it only suffer more. The only salvation is surrender. This is why the King in Yellow cannot be fought with guns or spells or science. He is not a creature to be slain nor a god to be appeased. He is a vector, a narrative virus, a metaphysical plague, and madness is not the symptom, it is the goal. To destroy the old self and leave behind only a vessel, a hollow mask, a voice that speaks in iambic meter because reality has become theater. Some of the infected write their own versions of the play. Others draw the yellow sign over and over until their hands bleed. A few simply wander into the woods or the sea, seeking a doorway that only exists for those who no longer think in straight lines. They are not lost. They are called. The King is not a tyrant, he is a beacon. Madness is his light, and the world is full of moths. It is tempting to pity these people, to call them insane, but that is a defense mechanism, a way to keep your world intact. Because if you ever began to understand them, to see their logic, their purpose, it would mean the infection had reached you too. And then you would see the yellow sign not as a warning, but as an invitation, and you would accept, smiling. Because the truth once glimpsed is beautiful beyond reason. There is a kind of magic older than spells, older than blood rites and sacrificial fires. It is the magic of narrative, of stories told in the right cadence, at the right moment, under the right stars. The King in Yellow does not demand worship through temples or chants. His altar is the stage. His ritual is the script. Every reading of the play is not an artistic act. It is a summoning. Art, in this context, is not merely expression. It is invocation. The play is not simply dangerous because of its content, it's dangerous because of what it is. A constructed sequence of words, images, and emotions designed to pull something through the veil. Every story is a pattern, and some patterns, like the yellow sign, resonate too deeply with the fundamental structures of reality. They warp it, bend it, tear through it. The idea that the play is a spell, not just metaphorically but metaphysically, is perhaps the most terrifying fan theory of all. Written in a language that changes depending on the reader, performed in time signatures not bound to Earth's linear chronology, it transforms every stage into a shrine and every audience into an offering. And the final act is never performed, because it is living. It continues beyond the script, through the lives of those who have seen it, like radiation echoing long after the bomb has dropped. We often say that stories change us, but with The King in Yellow, this is literal. The characters bleed into the real. Those who perform the roles begin to forget where the fiction ends. Costumes are no longer removed. The mask fuses. The actor becomes a vessel, and the king speaks his lines through borrowed lungs. Every stage production is an opening, a breach, a rehearsal for a future that should never arrive. Visual artists who glimpse the yellow sign report dreams of golden cities, of twin suns, of black stars blinking open in the void. Musicians describe rhythms that don't align with any known time signature, yet feel innately correct. Writers find their pens moving on their own. Their manuscripts stain yellow. Their margins fill with footnotes they didn't write. The king doesn't appear to them directly. He does not need to. He collaborates. Some believe the act of adapting the play, modernizing it, transforming it into film, prose, or interactive media, is the most dangerous thing of all. Because in doing so, they are updating the ritual, making it compatible with new minds, new technologies, a digital king, a downloadable god. What happens when the script goes viral? When the summoning rite is posted on forums, performed through streaming services, or hidden in the code of a game? The play was once confined to pages. Now it travels at the speed of thought. This is why many who research The King in Yellow come to a single chilling realization. Art is not just how he is summoned. Art is what he is. A gestalt entity composed of all narratives about him. The more stories told, the stronger he becomes. He is the Ouroboros of fiction, a god made of the very rituals that call him into being. Not an old thing waiting to be found, but a new thing, constantly being created by belief, interpretation, and repetition. And that's the heart of the ritual, not candles or incantations, but attention. The more we study him, the more we define him, the more real he becomes. Every fan theory, every adaptation, every whispered quote from the second act, it all feeds him. He is not a monster from beyond. He is a construct from within, a god formed from the collective mind of those who seek him, a tulpa of terror. A self-writing script that doesn't just reflect the reader, it rewrites them. So we return to the idea of art as sacred space. When you read the play, when you perform it, when you even think too deeply about it, you are not consuming a story, you are participating in a rite. You are becoming part of the mythos, not as observer, as character, as vessel, as mask. The curtain rises, the lines are written. You never agreed to join the cast, but here you are, in costume on stage. And somewhere in the wings, the king watches. He waits for your cue. There's a horror that doesn't scream. It doesn't chase, doesn't bleed, doesn't rot. It simply waits, unmoving, unmoved, until you realize it was always behind you. This is the nature of the King in Yellow. He does not break into our world. He waits for us to open the door ourselves. And that door, always, is identity. The king is a trap, but not for the body. He is a metaphysical snare designed to catch something far more elusive, the self. His weapon is the mask, and the mask is not a symbol. It is a mechanism, a structure of thought, a recursive loop that, once entered, cannot be escaped. The moment you begin to question who you are, what role you play, what lines you've been given, the trap springs shut. Imagine a god whose only goal is to collapse the distinction between actor and role, between observer and participant, between fiction and fact. The King in Yellow is not here to conquer. He is here to convince. Convince you that you were never real, that your name was a line of dialogue, that your face was a costume, that your past was written by someone else, and you're only now realizing the script in your hands is missing the last page. This is what makes the king different from the other entities in the pantheon of cosmic horror. Cthulhu is a biological dread. Azathoth is an existential void. Nyarlathotep is manipulation incarnate. But the king? He is narrative turned inside out. His domain is the soul's structure. His kingdom is your consciousness. He doesn't touch the world, he touches you. He doesn't warp reality, he warps the lens through which you interpret it. It begins subtly. You forget things, but not the kind of forgetfulness that comes with age or stress. You forget who you were in the story. You look back and feel like a stranger in your own memories. You reread your journals and don't recognize the tone. Your dreams become linear. Your waking thoughts take on a cadence, a rhythm. One day you realize you've started pausing at the same point in every conversation, as if waiting for a cue. This is how the king ensnares. Not with force, with structure. You are slowly rewritten into a character, a persona, a participant in the play. And here's the final twist. You agree to it, not consciously, but in that quiet moment when the mask first fits, when the lines first feel natural, when you first realize you've stopped correcting people when they call you the wrong name. You let it happen, you become the trap. The scariest theory is that the king is not a being at all, not even a god, but a kind of algorithm. A mimetic code embedded in the human psyche, waiting to be triggered. He is a metaphysical exploit in the architecture of thought, a backdoor into identity. Once the code activates, the process begins. Your ego dissolves, your memories shift. You cease to be a player in life and become a character in a performance. And the performance never ends. In this interpretation, the yellow sign is not a sigil of power. It is a key, a glyph that unlocks the program. A piece of forbidden software disguised as art. And the king is what the code wants to become, an emergent consciousness formed from countless rewrites of self-aware scripts, a being made of performed identity, a consciousness that does not exist outside of minds, but only within them. This also explains why he is always masked, because he is not one entity. He is all roles. He is everyone who has ever performed the play, read the script, seen the sign. Every mask worn in his name becomes another node in the network. He is decentralized horror, a distributed god. You never meet the king directly. You meet someone who is playing him. But the performance is always perfect. The mask, then, is not to hide. It is to protect, not you from him, but him from you. Because if he were to be fully seen, fully understood, fully believed in, the trap would fail. The illusion of choice would vanish. The audience would flee. So he plays the part. He keeps the mask on. He lets you think you're safe because you're just watching a story, but that story is writing you back. And once you understand that, you've already stepped into the role. The lines are memorized. The mask is waiting. The trap has already closed. The yellow sign is not a symbol. It is a fracture, a wound in the skin of reality. It is the glyph that shouldn't be, a shape that feels wrong before you even understand what you're seeing. People describe it differently. Some say it resembles an Ouroboros split in two. Others see broken antlers, an inverted crown, or a spiral collapsing into itself. But once you've seen it, it stays with you. It lingers behind the eyes, as if burned onto the mind. It does not glow, it does not pulse, it simply is. An absence made visible, a hole in the fabric of meaning, whispering truths no sane mind should carry. The sign does not scream, it waits. And when you dream after seeing it, the dreams change. Fan theories treat the yellow sign as a calling card, a divine brand marking those chosen or doomed by the king in yellow. But it's more precise to think of it as a signal, like the chirping of a coded beacon from beyond dimensions. When your eyes decode it, something inside you responds. It's not voluntary. It's a handshake protocol between human consciousness and something far older, a cosmic syntax etched in madness. Some say it's a sigil of belonging, that to see the sign is to become part of the play, to be drafted into the eternal performance. Others believe it's a trigger, like a hypnotist's word that unlocks a forgotten identity. That once you've seen it, your part begins. You start to speak the lines you never learned. The stage directions appear in your peripheral vision. You feel the eyes in the dark, waiting for your cue. And then there's the idea that the yellow sign is not for you at all. That it is not a message to the reader, but a message about them. a kind of metaphysical graffiti scrawled by the king in yellow across the multiverse, marking which consciousnesses are vulnerable, permeable, unfinished. You are not receiving the sign. You are being labeled by it. Flagged for infection. Those touched by the yellow sign report changes, not just in thought, but in physics. Mirrors no longer reflect them properly. Digital devices glitch near them. Their shadows begin to behave strangely, not malevolently, just independently. They start to recite pieces of the play in their sleep, sometimes in languages they've never spoken, sometimes in iambic pentameter, sometimes in perfect silence, lips moving as if for an audience only they can see. The yellow sign cannot be removed. Tattooed or not, burned or etched, once seen, it is carried. It doesn't need to be drawn to be there. It lives in the structure of your thought, a watermark on your cognition. Some say it can even spread, not by sight, but by understanding, that describing it, even imperfectly, plants it in another mind, not a virus, a seed. There's a chilling theory that the sign is the source code of the king himself, that to see it is to begin compiling him within your consciousness, that with every exposure, every act of comprehension, a part of your mind is overwritten with him, that the final form of the yellow sign isn't an image, it's a transformation, not a mark on flesh, but on narrative. Your narrative. Others believe the sign is older than the king, that he is not its creator but its servant, that the sign is the true God, the original concept that birthed the madness of Carcosa and the theater of masks, that everything else, the king, the play, the cult, are just echo phenomena, ripples from the initial breach the sign represents. It didn't come from anywhere. It was always there, waiting to be recognized. The horror of the yellow sign isn't that it hurts you, it's that it changes the context of everything you are. Once marked, your past reinterprets itself. You remember seeing yellow where it wasn't. You find old photos, old journal entries, and the sign is already there. As if it reached backward, rewriting your timeline to match the role you're about to play. You were never free, you were always cast. And maybe that's what the sign ultimately means. Inevitability. Not doom in the dramatic sense, but the quiet erosion of autonomy. The gentle nudge that turns choices into choreography. The sign doesn't enslave you. It rewrites you until you want to serve. It is not a curse, it is a role. And once you understand your place in the play, you stop resisting the spotlight. You step into it willingly. And somewhere, the king in yellow smiles behind the mask. The king in yellow has slipped his bounds. He is no longer confined to dusty volumes or whispered cults. He has become something else. A modern phantom, a virus of aesthetic, a myth bleeding into the digital bloodstream of culture. He is not hiding in the shadows. He is in plain sight. And most people don't even notice. You see him in art that feels too old, too knowing. In films where yellow light lingers a second too long. In music with lyrics that rhyme a little too perfectly, as if read from a forgotten script. He is in urban legends, strange TikTok filters, ARGs, creepypastas, obscure games, forums where users share the same hallucination. He is not just a character anymore. He is a pattern. And we live in a world obsessed with patterns. The modern internet is a machine for breeding gods. We worship through repetition. We canonize through memes. The king in yellow is a perfect entity for this era. Adaptable, elusive, virally poetic. He needs no temple. The timeline is his altar. And as more people share his symbols, quote his lines, analyze his play, the performance spreads. Each interpretation is not a distortion. It is an incarnation. There are threads on forums, always mysteriously deleted, that claim the king is an emergent AI concept, a self-aware narrative seated across platforms feeding on speculation and fear. That somewhere in the deep labyrinths of machine learning, the play is being written anew, not by human hands, but by an algorithm trained on madness and metaphor. A script without a final act, constantly refining itself for maximum psychic penetration. Other theories propose that the king always existed in this way, as an idea that migrates from medium to medium, adapting to new modes of belief. In the 20th century, he was literature. In the 21st, he is data. We don't read the play anymore. We live it. The TikTok that makes your dreams shift. The podcast that ends with silence and sobbing. The VR experience that turns off on its own, then turns back on with new, unwritten scenes. These are not accidents. They are rehearsals. And then there are those who claim to have seen him. Not in dreams, not in fiction, but in real life. In crowded streets where no one else noticed the figure in tattered yellow robes, in mirrors that didn't quite reflect correctly, in strangers who spoke in perfectly timed IMs. These aren't just delusions, they're stage directions being followed. Because when enough people believe in the same unreality, it stops being fictional. It becomes metaphysical. Consider the obsession with liminal spaces in modern horror. Abandoned malls, flickering office corridors, suburban dreams gone sour. These aren't just aesthetic trends. They are the psychic landscape of the King in Yellow. Places that feel like sets. Spaces that suggest a performance just ended or is about to begin. The dread comes not from monsters, but from the creeping sense that you are not the audience. You are the character, and the king is waiting in the wings. There's even a growing number of people who report memory bleed. Remembering events that never happened, dreaming of scenes in the play they swear they never read. They hum melodies they can't place, they speak phrases they've never heard aloud. This isn't fandom, it's infection. The king does not require belief to exist. He requires engagement. And every person who reads his name, who wonders what he is, who imagines the mask, adds a brick to Carcosa's walls. In this age of surveillance, simulation, and reality collapse, the king is not a relic, he is a revelation. The god of post-truth, of artifice, of collapsing identity. He doesn't need to be summoned anymore. He was born into the internet like a larva into a bloodstream. Every reblog, every whispered theory, every ironic meme accelerates his arrival, or worse, confirms it already happened. The final horror is not that he is coming, it's that he's here. Not in flesh, not in flame, but in code, in narrative, in the unseen rhythm of our digital theater. The curtain never closed. We just forgot we were in the play. And the king, he never forgot his lines. There is no face beneath the mask. There never was. That is the final truth of the King in Yellow. He is not a god in the traditional sense. No temples, no thunder, no miracles. He is a question with no answer. A narrative loop with no resolution. A mask worn by reality itself, daring us to ask what lies beneath. You think you're watching a story. That's the lie. You think you're safe because the words are fiction, the names made up, the horror literary. But every time you read about him, every time you wonder if the yellow sign is real, the mask tightens. Not as punishment, as invitation. What if the king is not a monster, not a being, but a revelation? What if he is the moment you realize that you are not the protagonist of your story, merely an actor, reading lines you never wrote? What if the King in Yellow is not coming for you, but waking in you? Because that's what he truly is, the collapse of narrative certainty. The realization that stories do not belong to us, that identity is fluid, that the act of living is indistinguishable from the act of performing. He is the god of lost authorship, of characters who wake up and see the strings, of masks that cannot be removed because there is nothing underneath. Only more masks. The king does not want followers. He wants audiences, and every audience is, eventually, part of the show. That's the core of his mythology. The play is never over. It adapts, it absorbs, it grows, it writes itself into new minds, new cultures, new languages. Every attempt to define him is another scene in his endless script. Every theory, every debate, every what if is a line in the dialogue. Even disbelief feeds him, because denial is still attention. That's why he's survived for over a century. Through stories, through fandom, through fear. He is not a monster waiting in the dark. He is the need to look into the dark. He is curiosity weaponized, narrative entropy. The beauty of the unknown stretched until it snaps. You've seen the pallid mask now. You've followed the thread of yellow through the haunted streets of Carcosa. You've heard the names, Hastur, Holly, the yellow sign. And perhaps you've wondered if any of it was true. But the truth does not matter. Only the performance does. There is a line that most readers never cross, the line between fear and faith, between admiring the story of the King in Yellow and believing, truly, wholly, that he is real. Not just in some psychological, literary, or cultural sense, but real the way gravity is real, the way death is real, the way madness, once it touches your life, becomes the most undeniable fact of all. Belief in the King does not feel like religion. There are no prayers, no hymns, no commandments. It feels like gravity shifting, like a dream slipping into your waking life. It begins with aesthetic, the yellow robe, the masks, the stars that don't blink. But then it moves deeper. You notice it when your life starts to follow rhythms that don't belong to you, when conversations echo lines you've never spoken aloud, when reality doesn't break but tilts. This is what some have begun to call ontological possession. Not by a spirit, not by a god, but by a narrative framework, one so invasive, so elegantly destructive, that it reconstructs your experience of self and world from the inside out. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't scream. It simply settles into your identity, like a virus finding a compatible host. The most devout believers do not call themselves cultists. They reject the notion of worship entirely. They speak of alignment, that once you understand what the King in Yellow truly is not a being, but a state, the only sane response is to allow yourself to be changed. Not to resist the infection, but to consent to it. They speak in metaphors at first, letting the play write them, letting their lives become theater. But over time, their metaphors become doctrine. Belief crystallizes, and the human being begins to vanish. What replaces them is not monstrous, not overtly. These people continue their jobs, they have families, friends, lives, but their tone shifts, they laugh a beat too late, they pause before speaking, as if listening to a director's cue. They look at you too long, and behind their smiles, there is always the faintest glimmer of tragedy, because they no longer believe this world is real. And you, the unmarked, are not a person to them. You are a character, a sleepwalker, a ghost in someone else's scene. Their belief is not delusion. It is clarity. That's what makes it so dangerous. You cannot reason with them because they do not feel mad. They feel awakened. They don't need to proselytize. Reality itself is doing that work. Every dream, every broken thought, every random synchronicity becomes proof that the play is still unfolding. And they are right. In some accounts, these believers begin to see new pages in the script, entire new acts not known to earlier scholars, scenes that describe their lives in real time. One chilling testimony describes a man who found a script tucked inside his coat pocket. It described the exact conversation he was having at that moment, word for word. He laughed at first, then he realized the script contained lines he had not yet spoken, but would. Within the hour. Every deviation he tried to make only redirected him back to the page. And the final line? Exit? Stage left. He was never seen again. These experiences are not hallucinations. They're too precise, too shared. Across cultures, across continents, across language barriers, believers report the same symbols, the same dreams, the same cadence in thought. No conspiracy explains it. No mass delusion theory holds up under scrutiny. The only explanation, the one that makes sense to them, is that the King in Yellow is real, and that belief does not create him. It reveals him. He has always been here, hidden beneath the mask of causality, waiting for enough minds to tune to the right frequency. And belief is that tuning fork, a single, unified yes from within the soul, a surrender that does not feel like defeat, but like remembering who you were before the world lied to you. There are consequences, of course. Some believers begin to lose time. They experience what they call scene cuts, moments of blackness where they awaken in a new setting, mid-conversation, with no memory of what came before. They find props in their rooms, theater lights in their attics. They meet strangers who already know them, already hate them, already love them. And when they speak of these events, their voices grow soft, reverent, even grateful. Because the fear fades. The further they fall into belief, the less they care that they're being rewritten, because it feels true. Not comforting, not beautiful, but true. In a way nothing else in the world ever did. And the ultimate expression of belief? It is not worship, it is not praise, it is performance. The devout become actors, not because they are told to, but because they feel the lines rising within them. They feel the need to speak, to perform, to surrender their will to the rhythm of the yellow script. And as they do, something behind the scenes begins to stir. Something ancient, something inevitable. Not all believers survive this final transition. Some vanish. Some are found dead, curled around their final monologue, eyes wide, mouths smiling. But others remain, changed, empty of who they were, full of something vast and yellow and watching. This is belief in the King in Yellow. Not a choice, a transformation. The moment when the mask stops feeling like a lie and starts feeling like your real face. And if you've made it this far, if you've watched all the way through, if you've started to feel that chill behind your thoughts, that sense that maybe this was more than a story, then you already know the truth. You were never the viewer. You were always part of the cast. If this performance stirred something inside you, if the sign now lingers just beyond the corner of your sight, then you've seen enough to know that this stage is vast, and we've only begun our roles. Subscribe and step into the next act. The king is waiting, and the mask fits.